course I do. I love you, and I love you, and I love you. Don't judge me. Hey, Pen Gangsta here, and you might be able to figure out what I'm talking about today. And that would be the Visconti Van Gogh Impressionist series fountain pens. I absolutely love this series. The first time I saw it a few years back, I fell in love. The very first pen I saw, it was the Van Gogh Blue Portrait pen. And I knew that I had to have it. You might not know this about me. Not only am I a pen and ink enthusiast, but I am also an art history enthusiast. In fact, I love art history. So when I saw the Van Gogh pens, I was like, wow, fountain pens and art history based on Van Gogh paintings, yes. So the first pen I ended up getting was the Visconti Van Gogh Blue Portrait. I was smitten after I had it. I wrote with it. I loved it. I loved the way it looked. I loved the way it wrote. It was terrific. And so from that point forward, I made it my mission to start collecting the whole series, or as many as each painting as I could get. And so I ended up getting quite a few, and it wasn't until just recently that I finished my collection. And so the idea behind this was when I finished my collection, when I had all the ones that I could get, I would have enough to make a video series about it and talk about the paintings that the pens look like. I have 12 of them. I am missing a couple of them. There's a couple that are really hard to find, which are the sunflowers, the room in, I think it's the room in Arles, or Vincent's room, Gauguin's chair. I can't think of there's like two more. So there's actually like 5 of them I don't have. But so far I do have all 12 of them. Visconti's Van Gogh Impressionist series fountain pens currently cover the most productive years of Van Gogh's career. Now, Van Gogh was only active for 10 years. He started painting at the age of 27 until the age of 37 when he took his own life. And the pens cover that part of his life. Is like the last 3 years of his life. A lot of the pens actually cover his work that he had created in Arles. And that's where he lived, in the little yellow house, and where Paul Gauguin came and joined him. He did that, and then it covers paintings from, of course, some of the most famous paintings of Vincent Van Gogh is when he was staying at an asylum in Saint-Rémy de Provence. And those paintings would include Starry Night, is probably one of the most prolific paintings that Van Gogh made, and probably the most well-known out of all of his paintings. So that was done at the asylum. I don't know if any of you guys know that or not, but that's true. Finally, on to Arles, which is back in northern France, and he did his wheat field series there, and those were actually some of the last paintings that he created before he took his own life. Unfortunately, he had succumbed to depression, and a lot of these emotions were reflected in his paintings. So what I am gonna do is actually cover all these pens, and it's gonna be broken into 4 videos. The first 2 videos are going to cover 6 pens. Those pens will be covering the paintings that were completed in Arles. The third video will cover the paintings and pens that are in Saint-Rémy de Provence. And then finally, the 4th video will cover the works that were completed in Arles. 4 videos, hopefully you can handle it. So this is gonna be a combination of fountain pens and art history, which are my 2 loves. I'd like to go over some of his backgrounds and some of his methods. And these are just things that I believe are important to know, because a lot of people don't know the whole history about Van Gogh. In fact, the only thing they think of is, oh, is that the artist that he cut off his ear Yeah, he cut off his ear, but of course he was also suffering from unfortunate mental breakdowns, and that is what led to him severing off his ear. But there are also other things about Van Gogh that people should know, such as his career spanned 10 years, from the age of 27 until the age of 37. But during that time, 10 years, and this is crazy because not a lot of artists did this. I mean, if you think of some of the most famous artists like Johannes Vermeer, who has, I think it's like 36 paintings from his career, which was a bit longer. 10 years, Van Gogh had left behind more than 850 paintings and about 1,300 drawings. So he was really, I mean, this guy was, it's like all or nothing, right? He had pretty much breathed, lived, paint. I mean, that's what he did. There's also a rumor like he ate paint chips, so I don't know about that. He had really thought yellow tasted good. So a lot of his artistic influences, you can see little bits and pieces of them appearing in his works, where he gets a lot of his inspiration. A couple of French artists, the first being Eugène Delacroix, who painted a very famous painting called Liberty Leading the People, and also Jean-Francois Millet, who is famous for The Gleaners. He also was highly involved in the Impressionist circles. He made friends with some of these people, and they had also influenced his work, especially those who were studying or experimenting in color theory or different types of painting techniques, including there's a couple of artists that he was really getting a lot of influences from, and that would be the works from Georges Seurat, who is mostly well known for his pointillist technique, and The Island of La Grande Jatte is probably his most famous painting ever. Another artist that he was highly influenced by, who was also very much into the pointillist technique, was Paul Signac. Paul Signac and Georges Seurat, they had inspired Van Gogh with their uses of bright colors, their really high interest in doing lots of the pointillist technique. And what Van Gogh did was he took this pointillist technique and he adapted it into his own style. So he still did some dots, but he also did lots of dashes as well. And so a lot of his paintings feature, you know, these, and they're not like Seurat's dots were like these really fine dots. You know, in fact, The Island of La Grande Jatte took about 3 years to complete. It's a big painting, all composed of these little dots. Van Gogh finished paintings like he had finished them in a day. He was highly productive, and he had created lots of paintings, sometimes 2 or 3 in a day. And so what his technique was, is he used this technique called impasto. And impasto, I know it sounds like an Italian pasta dish, it's not. It's actually a painting technique that is used by artists, and what it is thick applications of paint. And it leaves behind a textural surface on the canvas. And so, I mean, it's highly visible. I mean, you look like you can reach out and touch it, although I don't advise that, especially at the museums. You would probably get kicked out, or the security guard would come up and give you a very stern warning. Don't touch the paint. It's happened to me. Don't judge me. A lot of people know Van Gogh for all of his self-portraits. And he created a lot of self-portraits. And this was mostly to document his, you know, where he was at in his life at that moment. That's why there's so many of them. It was almost like, I would make it the equivalent of today of people taking selfies and examining your place in this world. That's essentially what Van Gogh was doing with these self-portraits. And the reason I believe he did it was because he was suffering from mental illness, very dark, deep depression. And I believe he was trying to understand himself and probably trying to figure out why he was so different from everyone else. Van Gogh was also using lots of color theory in his painting. So he was highly aware of these new color theories that were occurring during the time that he was painting. And he had really used color to give it this type of energy in order to draw the viewer in and bring the viewers into his paintings and to understand the subject matter better. And what better way to express oneself than with color? Well, that's the background of Van Gogh. And so now let's go ahead and talk about the first part, which is his time in Arles. Vincent actually spent much of his childhood wandering the woods and the fields around the area that he lived. And this is how he had developed his love of nature, because he always wanted to live in a rural environment, and he felt that he could draw strength from nature. And that is a reason why he relocated to Arles from Paris. It was here that he started to develop his distinctive style, which was these elongated rhythmic brushstrokes that he is highly famous for. And he completed several of these landscape paintings in Arles, and he absolutely fell in love with harvests and blossoming orchards. He ended up immersing himself in these studies of orchards, and it was like a study of whites and pinks. And he also expressed to his brother Theo, who was living in Paris, that he found a certain optimism existed within the blossoming orchards around Arles. One of the paintings that we're going to talk about that's associated with the first pen is Peach Trees in Blossom, which Visconti has called it Souvenir de Mauve. This painting was completed in April of 1888, and it was actually completed just a few months after Vincent's arrival in Arles. And he was at work on this study when he was in the midst of painting Peach Trees in Blossom, also known to us as Souvenir de Mauve. He had received news that his cousin, Anton Mauve, had passed away. That's why it's called Souvenir de Mauve, in honor of Mauve's memory. I think that's actually really nice. With the Souvenir de Mauve pen, Visconti really took into consideration Van Gogh's look at pinks and whites that he was concentrating on deeply. If you look at the pen body, even the swirling movement of the resin tend to mimic the impasto brushstrokes that Van Gogh made on his paintings. The next pen related to the Orchard series in Arles is the Orchard in Blossom, and you might know it as this pen. So this is also, the Orchard in Blossom was a bunch of plum trees that he painted, and that was completed also in April of 1888. The structure of the plum tree branches are visible through the blossoms, and that is because of Van Gogh's vertical brushstrokes. He really found something special with these flowering trees. To Vincent, these flowering trees represented an awakening and hope. Orchard in Blossom also picks up the pink hues with the use of the rose gold trim. The whites and grays also intermingle on the resin, like the tree branches do with the blossoms that grow on them. Pollard willows were one of Van Gogh's favorite subjects to paint. In fact, throughout his career, he had created numerous paintings of these trees. The Pollard willows were painted right after he had severed his ear. So it's actually one of the last paintings to be created in Arles before he relocated to Saint Remy. So he once wrote that if one draws a Pollard willow as though it were a living being, which it actually is, then the surroundings follow more or less naturally. If only one has focused all of one's attention on that one tree and hasn't rested until there was some life in it. So the painting depicts an empty road which is bordered on one side by a brick wall and on the other side, a line of Pollard willow trees.
Pollard Willows resin blends together the colors of the trees with the green of the grass and the red or rust color of the brick wall. If you look closely at the pen resin, again, Visconti has managed to create a resin that mimics the brushstrokes and swirling motions of Vincent Van Gogh's brush.
Well, that's it for the first episode. Be sure to join me for the next episode, which will cover the second part of the Arles paintings and Visconti Van Gogh Impressionist pens. The pens that we looked at today were Souvenir de Mauve, Orchard in Blossom, and Pollard Willows. Thanks for watching. Take care.